Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph. So I posted a BTS of this photo shoot and you guys seem to love it. And then I also got a few questions asking about how I edited the photos, because in there I had included some of the edited photos and people wanted to know how I retouch it. So that's what this video is about. It's also something that I think I want to start doing. So I'm going to be picking random questions and then creating videos as answers to those questions. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will pick some questions and create videos answering those questions. So the comments box is just for you. Ask as many questions as you want, and then I will create videos based on the questions. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is, I believe I tackled this in two folds. So I first of all did an overall adjustment, and then I later on adjusted the backdrop to increase the separation. This is something that I like to do a lot. Usually when I'm shooting in the studio or when I'm shooting my images, sometimes I like to keep the tones almost in the same hue space. But sometimes when I'm editing, I also just want to increase the separation between those colors just so my subject can pop off a lot. So the first thing I will do is go into my white balance. And I think I just made a very, very tiny adjustment. I think I moved this to about 5,000 just to cool it down a little bit. And cooling it just makes the melanin begin to show. So if I just do a quick before and after, you will see that from the subject all the way to the backdrop, there is a warm cast in there. And just by reducing the white balance, we already are beginning to get that rich dark skin tone to pop. Right now, the next thing I'll also do is just go straight into my levels. And over here, what I'm going to do is just increase the contrast a little bit. So I'm going to start off by bringing the highlights down a little bit like that. And then I'm also going to bring in the shadows and then darken the image down a little bit. So before, this is how it looked. After, you can see that we are adding a bit of contrast in there. Now, Capture One also likes to add a lot of sharpening. So the next thing I will obviously do is to remove all of the sharpening. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that this is something that I'm always doing. I do not like the sharpening that Capture One does. I want to manually include sharpening anywhere I want, because I feel like Capture One's sharpening is not organic and it takes away from the image. It also gives me too much work in post-processing. All right. So after that, I went into my color editor, I'm sure, and I was in the basic tab for the majority of the parts. So now the colors in her skin are in the red, orange, yellowish tone. So I'm sure I'm going to be adjusting colors around there. So in the saturation, I'm just going to up the saturation of the red just a little bit. Somewhere like this should be good. And then the lightness, I'm going to bring down quite a bit. Somewhere like this, I think should be okay. Now, if I do it before and after, you will see that we've been able to add some contrast in there and she's really beginning to pop off the backdrop, right? I also will go into the orange tone and see if I can make an adjustment here. I'm going to shift the reds a little bit more towards the yellowish tone. And I'm also going to increase the saturation ever so slightly. And I'm going to darken it a little bit. Now you see that this is affecting her skin quite a bit. So something like this. Obviously before, after, she is beginning to look a lot richer. All right. Now, I'm also going to go into the yellows and also do the same thing. I'm going to reduce the lightness quite a bit, somewhere like so, and also increase the saturation of the yellows a little bit, somewhere like that. I'm also going to move, again, the warm tones into a little bit of a greenish tint so that, again, it's just adding up to all the adjustments that we've made and it's going to help complement the structure of the image. Somewhere like this, I think looks good. So before, this is how it looked. It had this wash of warm tint in there. And now you can see that we've added some contrast and she's beginning to pop off the backdrop. Now that I'm done with this is basically like the overall adjustment that I was doing, right? I'm going to go into my layers, and what I will do now is create a new adjustment where I'm going to select the backdrop. What I'm going to do is click on background, and Capture One should automatically create a backdrop selection for me. All right, so when I press M on the keyboard, it shows me all that has been highlighted versus what's not highlighted. So anywhere that is red is what is going to show the adjustments that I'm going to make on there, right? Okay, now I'm going to go back into my white balance and let's see if we can make some adjustments here as well. So I'm just going to go down a little bit. And by cooling it, if I go all the way, you can see that, yes, we are adding a bit of separation, but it's a little bit too much for me. So let me just Well, let me just type it in there. Let me just cool it down to like 5,000. Then from there, I'm going to go into my levels as well, because I still want to increase the contrast in there. And rather in the midtones, that's where I'm going to make my adjustments. You can see that when I move it, it lightens up the backdrop a little bit and makes her a little bit more visible. So somewhere around here, I think works great. All right. From there, I'm going to go into my exposure and I'm going to increase exposure just a tiny bit. You can see that what I'm doing is just increasing the exposure level of the backdrop, helping separate her from the backdrop even more. Okay. I'm also going to increase the contrast in the backdrop just a tiny bit. And I will bring down the saturation because I don't want the colors to compete so much with her skin tone. So after making my exposure adjustments, I want to go into my color editor. The colors I want to play with primarily will be the orange and yellow tones because I feel that's what's more present in the backdrop, right? So starting off with the orange, what I will do is just shift it more towards a yellowish tint, right? Somewhere like this should be great. And then I'm also going to desaturate it a little bit. All right, I'm also going to increase the lightness, and all these tiny adjustments will come together to give me that separation I'm looking for. So that's before, and here's after. You can see that already we are increasing the separation between our subject and the backdrop. I'm going to go into the yellows now and start making my adjustments. So in the hue, I'm going to just again shift that a little bit more towards the green because I'm shifting it away from the warm tint ever so slightly. And this is again going to help the separation between my subject and the backdrop. I know I'm saying this a lot, but that's the aim inside my raw processing software, to increase separation as much as possible. All right, so I reduce the saturation as well, and inside the lightness, I'm just going to increase that a little bit, somewhere like this. I think should be okay. So if I do it before and after, you can see that already we've been able to, make her pop, and she's looking really, really interesting. And you can see that she is the subject of the shot. Now what I'm going to do is right click and click on edit with, and I'm going to open this inside Photoshop. All right, so now that we have our image inside Photoshop, there are a few things again that I also want to do right here. Now I know that this image is primarily going to live on Instagram, so I will set in my crop ratio. Now pressing C on the keyboard is going to bring up the crop dialog box, and I'm also using a 4:5 aspect ratio. Now you can see that this is cropping the image, and I don't want that. I want all of my subject to show in the frame. So I'm just going to click over here and raise that up, and click down here and bring it down. I also feel like she's not too centered in the frame, so I will just shift this around somewhere like this and then hit the check mark. Okay, so now that we've been able to do this, you can see that there are some empty spaces that we need to fill in. So what I'm going to do is just hit M on my keyboard, making sure that I'm selected on my backdrop, and I'm gonna just select up to somewhere here, hit Command J on the keyboard to make a duplicate, hit Command T, and then I'm gonna right click and then click on distort. So when I do that, I'm able to click the center point and drag it up. When I hit enter, you can see that we've been able to expand the backdrop without losing a lot of detail in the backdrop. All right. Now we need to expand the backdrop on the right hand side. If you look at the bottom here, you can see my backdrop showing through, and if I attempt to expand the backdrop, it means I'm going to drag this all the way to the end. So what I will do actually is just click S for the clone stamp tool, and then I just paint over by sampling and painting over the stand so that we have a clean backdrop that we can expand. I'm going to do the same thing. Go back onto my background, hit M on my keyboard, and then I'm gonna drag around here, hit Command J to duplicate one more time, and then I'm gonna hit Command T, right click, go to distort, and I'm gonna drag this out as well. All right, now you can see that we've been able to easily fill our backdrop or expand it to fit the new size or the new cropping that we had, and it looks really, really seamless. I'm gonna hit Command E to merge the expansion to the backdrop, and now we can begin with our retouching. Now, remember in the previous editing video that I shared, I said it's always better to have a game plan so that you know exactly what you're going to do to your image. Also, I'm going to be using my workflow retouching actions. So if you don't have that, I will highly recommend that you go onto my website, click on the workflow actions and copy it, because it's something that I've been using for years, and I retouch all my photos using my workflow actions. It's helped me create a system and that's what I'm going to be using to retouch this image. So if you're interested, link is down below, check it out. And if you copy it, you're supporting me, helping me create more videos like this. All right, moving on, we need to, again, draw our game plan, right? I'm going to create a new blank layer, and on there, let me just select a blue color. All right, I know for sure that this dress has a line in there that I want to straighten. So this obviously is following the curve of her body, and over here I think needs a little bit of straightening, so I will do that adjustment. And then also I think because of the way she was posing, we had a little bit of fold here that I would probably have to shape out and enhance, because that's not how she looks naturally. I think the angle I was shooting from and the pose also just distorted that a little bit, so I'm going to fix that. And then also just even out her arm ever so slightly, because it's pressing against her skin. We have that bulge in here, and I'm going to even that out. Now if I zoom in a little bit more, you'd also see that we have some spots around here that I can take care of. And then also on her face, she has very, very good skin. The makeup was also really good. Shout out to Maquillage for doing an amazing job. And yeah, these are just a few little things that I will tackle. And also on the backdrop, you will notice there is a little bit of a glow right here. And that's because of how close the modifier was to her. We have a bit of spill or flare showing through, and I can just take that out easily by recoloring that lighter tone into a tone that blends with the backdrop. So now that I know that these are the major things I have to tackle, I know that the next thing I will probably have to do will be some color grading. And then I'd also, just do a little bit of highlight pop. I'm going to use my action for that, just so she stands out a lot. And pretty much that should be it. Obviously, we're going to be doing some dodging and burning. So dodge and burn, and then we're also going to be doing some frequency separation. So I think now we can begin to work on those little things and then fix the image and enhance it for it to look the way some of the other images I had already created looked. All right, I'm going to delete this layer and we're going to start off. Now, my actions are in twofold. So if you're somebody who doesn't really know the steps to take or follow when retouching, you don't know where to start, where to end. If you go into my actions, I have two sets in there. I have the workflow individual actions and I have the workflow retouching actions. So if you run the retouching actions, these are just a 3-step process. So run this first, run the second, and complete set will create all the layers that you need, and then you can start working step by step to follow through. If you are a little bit more advanced and you want more options and work faster, then there are a ton of actions in here that you can pick from and run them at any point in time. For example, I have realistic skin texture. I have a pop, which I'm going to be running at the end. I have relighting, just in case I want to refocus the light on my subject, I can do that. I also have a color grade action, and I have a noise action, frequency separation, dodge and burn. I have all of those, so check it out. The link is going to be down below. So first of all, I'm going to create a new blank layer, and I'm going to zoom in, and this is where we're going to be doing a lot of our healing, right? So actually, let me delete it and go into my actions and show you how I can do that. So if I go into the workflow retouching actions, I can click on run this second, because I know that that's going to tell me to do my blemish removal or my healing. So this one I'm going to do all of the healing, right? I'm going to hit J on my keyboard, and that's going to bring up my healing brush tool. Now, all I'll do is sample clean areas and paint over the blemish, and you can see that it will just disappear like that. Let me zoom in and do a demo for you guys to see before I speed up the process. So you see that we have this inconsistency right here, right? We can see that we have a skin tone looking smooth and transitioning beautifully, but we have this highlight over here that isn't supposed to be there. So if I sample this area right here, and then in order to sample, you need to hit Option or Alt on your keyboard, click on that area you want to sample, and then just paint over what you want to get rid of, and you see that it's gotten rid of that. So that's all I'm doing. Any areas that are standing out that I feel are not supposed to be where they are, I'm just using the healing brush and then getting rid of those spots. So that's all I'm going to be doing. I'm going to speed up this process so this video doesn't drag or become too long. Alright, so now I'm almost done with the healing of the blemishes on your skin. I know I'm going to run my frequency separation, and that's what I'm actually going to do now. So now that I'm done with this, I'm just going to merge this down, hit Command E to merge it. So I know I'm not going to come back and make any more adjustments to the image, right? In terms of healing. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my actions. This time I'm going to go into the Phloshop individual actions, and I'm going to click on the 16-bit because I know that my image is in 16 bits. Over here, you see RGB/16. That means that the image is in 16 bits. All right. So I'm going to press on play, and it's going to start running the action. So I need to define a radius of a blur that I feel I'll be happy with to proceed with my frequency separation. I think 5.6 is pretty decent, or I can just go down a little bit to about 5.1. Hit OK, and it's going to run the rest of the actions and create two new folders for me, right? So one is frequency separation and the other is the helper. The helper creates a contrast black and white image, so I'm not distracted by color when I'm doing frequency separation. That's the approach that I like to go with, and it pretty much works for me. Sometimes I will just hide the contrast so that it isn't as defined, or maybe I can just lower the opacity of the contrast layer so that it is there, but it's just not as strong as it is. So you have all of these flexibilities with the actions, and I mean, you can pick and choose however you want to use them to work. And that's a good thing about it. It's flexible. You can still customize it to suit your workflow and help you create that signature look that you're looking for. So now with frequency separation, what I'm going to do is go onto my blur copy, and I'm going to pick my mixer brush. Now you can also see the settings up here, and then set them to yours as well if you want to use the same settings as I'm using. And all I will do now is just go over the image and paint over areas that I feel are not transitioning smoothly amongst themselves. So inside the highlight spaces, I will just try and blend the highlights, and inside the midtones, also blend the midtones with themselves to smoothen the transition. So if I do it before and after, you'd see that there were a little bit of patches. If I zoom in, you see before, after, and we're already beginning to even out some of those transitions, right? So that's all again that I will be doing. Also notice that I am not painting across this way. I'm painting up and down on her arm. When I get to her chest, I will move across because that is the direction of the light. That is the direction in that part that I'm painting. So if I go up and down, I will be mixing highlights, midtones, and shadows, and I don't want that. I want to preserve where the natural, lighting is in the image. If you go across, you will be bleeding highlights into midtones, midtones into shadows, and vice versa, and that is not what you want. It's not going to make your images look flattering. Again, I'm going to speed this process up so that the video is not too long. But then again, always be careful, always be mindful, and then pay close attention to the direction of your light, and you will be able to get some decent results with your frequency separation. Alright, so now that we have our frequency separation done, again, I'm also speeding up this process because I don't want to drag the tutorial, and also because it's just a demo, I'm not going to be as precise as I would be if I'm doing this for myself, right? But by all means, if you're doing it for yourself, please take your time and spend as much time as you can, and that is also going to help you achieve very natural looking results. So now that we have this out of the way, I can delete the frequency separation helper layer because I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to run my dodging and burning actions. So I'm going to go back into my actions and look for dodge and burn complete. You can do that, which is going to create all the necessary layers that you need. So your dodge, your burn, and also create a helper layer that you can turn off or turn on, or also reduce the contrast. You still have that flexibility with any of these actions, or you can pick and choose. So for example, if I just want to create a dodge layer, I can just select dodge and press play, and it runs that quickly. I can also go to burn, just click that, and it runs it quickly. Again, these actions are optimized for your workflow. All right, but what I want to do is actually use a complete set because I need the black and white in this case. All right, so creating that creates all of that for me. I can hide the contrast in this case, and now what I'm going to be doing with my dodging and burning, because I did frequency separation in such a very careful manner, I don't really have to do a lot of dodging and burning. But this step is just to fix some of the issues that I wasn't able to fully fix with my frequency separation. One other thing I also like to do to my frequency separation after I'm done is just to reduce opacity to about 80%. And that just allows still some of that natural feel of the image to show through. Then I'm going to go into my dodging and burning, and here I can start by again painting. Oh, that's too much. Always remember to use a very low flow when you're doing dodging and burning, and also feather your brush as much as possible to make it soft, and so the blending becomes less noticeable. If I zoom into this area right here, if I do it before and after, you see that we had this very dark patch amidst a mid-tone section and it wasn't flattering. So by dodging that out, you can see that we're blending the transitions and making it look a lot smoother. So that's all dodging and burning really is about, looking for patches or inconsistencies. If they are too light, you burn them. If they are too dark, you dodge them, right? So I'm looking for another dark patch somewhere here, and I'm just painting over that. Let me look for a place that I feel is too bright, maybe somewhere here, looking too bright, so I can just burn that in, and also somewhere around here. If I do it before and after of the burn, you see that we are blending those areas in. So that's all I'm also going to be doing throughout this image, looking for places that are not, you know, moving smoothly, and then also just try and even that out. So now that I have my dodging and burning done, what I'm going to do is actually merge down my adjustments. Okay, and I'm going to call it dodge and burn, so that I know that that is what is on that layer, right? If I zoom in a little bit and do it before and after, you see that we've been able to really smoothing the image a little bit. What I want to do now is just add a bit more shape or form or definition to hair. So I'm going to go into my actions, go into dodge, press play, and on the layer mask, what I'm going to do is now just make hair almost 3D pop off the frame. So anywhere there's a highlight, I'm just going to go over that, just like that, and also do the same in her dress, and also a little bit more over where the lighting is. So if I do it before and after, you see that we are making hair pop a little bit in terms of the highlights. I'll go into the burn and press play, go back to the layer mask, and also darken anywhere that needs darkening. This just helps you shape up your subject a lot more by defining or increasing the contrast ratios where they're supposed to be, and that just helps with definition. All right. So with the two of them, if I put it in the group and do it before and after, you see that we've been able to really make it pop a little bit more. I'd also reduce the opacity just so it's not too strong. Now, the next thing I want to do is, obviously, because she is a dark skin tone and dark skin people usually have some tonal variations, we can just blend, you know, the skin tones a little bit so that the variations match up a little bit. So I'm going to create a new blank layer, and I'm going to change the blending mode to color. And what I'll do is sample a color right here, a color that I like, and then just start painting over the areas that I feel need to be blended a little bit more. So I'm using a flow of 17 because I know I would adjust my opacity to blend everything in. I'm going over her face a little bit as well, just like that. And now what I'll do is reduce opacity to a point like this. So before, after, before, after. If I zoom in, you'd see that her neck area was a little bit dark, but now we've been able to blend it with the rest. Again, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. We just want to shift those tones for it to match a little bit more. I also know that there has to be some warmth in her face. Right now it's looking a little bit too cool. So I'll go into curves, and then I'll go into the reds, push up the reds a little bit. I'll go into blue and add a bit more yellow in there, and also invert the layer mask. Now what I'll do is again paint this new tone over her face. If I do it before and after, you see that we are warming up her face a lot, right? and then also do the same thing over the areas that I painted earlier. And this just brings some warmth back onto those areas that are rather too cool for my liking, right? So before, after, before, after. Again, I don't want to keep it at 100%, so I'll just reduce opacity to about 60%. So before, after, before, after. It's present, but it's just not as striking, or it's not dominating the image so much. So now that we have all of these done, I think now I want to bring in my backdrop. So I imported it from one of the images that I'd already edited, and this is it right here. So if I turn that on, you see that we have some textures going on. So let me just delete all of these layer masks and show you what I'm doing on these layers, right? So currently I filled the layer mask with black, and I want to fill it with white, so you guys will see what that looks like, all right? So this is it. If I hit Command T, I can increase this to fit the rest of the image, just like that. Currently the opacity is at 30%. If I move to 100, this is what it looks like. And if I go back to normal, this is the image. So first of all, you import the image like this, move it to soft light, and then reduce opacity to about 30%. This just helps it blend in a little bit more. But you see again that it is on top of my subject, and I just want this to be in the backdrop. So what you can easily do is click on the layer mask and then paint with black on top of that with a high flow, maybe about 75%, and then just paint it out of your subject. So painting it something like this just ensures that this texture is not on top of your subject. What I'd also do is just increase my brush a little bit and then just feather it into the backdrop so that it's not immediately right behind here. So this just makes it blend in a little bit more. Now for the next layer, I'm also going to again go back to normal and invert the layer mask so it's white, and then also just increase the opacity to 100. So this is what it looks like. I also just made it black and white so it blends in a little bit more, but I can quickly just readjust this to fit, just like that. And somewhere here I think it's okay. All I wanted was these clouds to fit in the backdrop. So again, just make it bigger, something like that. So now that everywhere is black and white, what I can do is go back onto the layer mask, set it to soft light again, and now I can paint this out of my subject one more time, right? But this also, I don't want it to be extremely visible in every part of the frame. So I'm just going to be painting it out of where my initial backdrop is, and then just make sure that I have a little bit of it in the backdrop showing through. So that's it. Just this little bit just creates that level of interest that I'm looking for. All right, I'm going to paint out of her face as well. Yeah, this looks pretty good. So now that we have our backdrop inserted as well, all I need to do now to bring everything together is my color grading. So if I go into my actions, I can easily select color grade, right? And press play. What this is going to do is create some layers that I need. For example, if I want to add a lookup table like my melanin, I can do that. So if you don't have my melanin LUTs, you can do that as well. But I'm not going to be using this melanin skin tone LUTs in this edit. What I will be doing is creating quite a number of color balance and selective adjustments and be using that to, color grade this image. All right. So now that I have my color balance, the first thing I will do is go into my shadows, and these are very, very tiny adjustments that you need to make. So let's say -1, I'm shifting the image a little bit more towards cyan, but just a little bit. If I go too much, this is what it's looking like, but just a tiny hint of that color in there goes a long way. I'd also just increase the greens a little bit like that. And I'm also going to add a bit more yellow in there, somewhere like this. And I'll go into my midtones and also make some adjustments. So over here, I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm just moving this a little bit more towards the negative side, just like that. And also negative here. And I can just increase, you see, by increasing the blues, we are darkening his skin even more, but obviously this is way too much. So let's just say the same +3 this time on the image. I'll also go into my highlights and see if I can add some color into the highlights. So I'm gonna warm it up in the highlights just a little bit. So like, let's say +5. And the same thing here as well. I'm gonna go +5. And in the cyan, I'm also going to add plus in there. All right, this is looking good already. So if I do it before and after, you can see that we are shifting the tones a little bit. All right, from there, I'm going to go into selective color. So let me just bring selective color down here. Okay, now what I want to do is tackle my black. So inside the blacks, I think I want to go into the yellows and actually reduce the yellows in the blacks a little bit, just like that. And inside magenta as well, just a little bit. So like, let's say -1, and cyan as well, just go -1. Then from there, I'm going to go into neutrals and see if I can make some adjustments as well. So over here, I think I want to go +1. So you can see I'm just making tiny adjustments. So I go, actually, I think the negative looks good. So let's say -1 over here. And inside the yellows, I think I can add a bit more yellow, so +1. All right, now I'm going to go into the whites. And I think there really isn't a lot of whites in there. So what I'd rather do is, there is a tiny bit of an effect here. So let's say +2, that should work well. All right. Now I'm going to go into hue saturation and I'm going to make some adjustments to my red tone. So inside the reds, I think I can just desaturate it because it's too strong for me. Before, after, you can see that it's really dulling down the image a little bit because again, we're going to add that pop later on. And I can also just reduce the lightness ever so slightly. Yeah, I think that looks good. I'm going to go into yellows and let's see what we can do inside the yellows. Also, let's just reduce the saturation. All right, that looks good. And should we brighten? I think brightening is dulling it down a bit. So I just might darken this a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks quite good. So before, after, before, after. You can see that we are making her blend with the backdrop a little bit more. All right, I'm going to go into magentas and I'm going to pull that down, especially in her hair. That's where you see the effect. All right, I think that looks good. Okay, so before, after, before, after. Now, I'm going to create a new color balance adjustment and I'm going to go into my midtones again. And this time, let me just increase the warmth a little bit. Also add a bit more magenta in there and add a bit more blue again. All right. I'm going to go into the highlights and I'm going to add a bit more yellows in there, increase this just a little bit and also increase this tiny bit. Okay, I think we're beginning to look good. If I just do it before and after of the color grade, you can see that she's not really popping as much, but everything is beginning to blend a little bit better. I'm going to create a new selective adjustment layer. And I'm going to go negative over here and the same thing over here as well. Just reducing these tones a little bit. I think this pretty much looks good for my color grading because I've been able to tone down the colors, make them blend in a little bit more. So what I want to do now is go into my levels and bring back a little bit of contrast because I think we've lost some contrast because of the adjustments that we made. I'm going to bring in the shadows ever so slightly and I'm going to bring in the highlights as well. And by doing this, we're just increasing the contrast in the image. Now you can see that she's really beginning to pop a lot, right? All right, I think we're looking good. There are just a few more things I want to do. So I think that the color here, as part of the plan that we formed earlier, I've not made that change, including the liquify. So what I'm going to do is create a new blank layer, change the blending mode to color, and I'm going to sample color right here and then just paint over that. You can see that automatically that blue tone vanishes. I'm also going to create a new hue saturation adjustment and I'm going to click on this select icon here and click in her hair. This tells me that there is some magenta in her hair still, and I don't want that. I want it to be black. So I'm going to desaturate the magenta and also darken it down a little bit. Just like that. Now to make sure this stays only in the hair, I'm going to invert the layer mask, and now I'm going to paint with white just inside her hair. So this ensures that the adjustment I made is only affecting her hair. All right. I'm also going to now hit Shift Option Command E, and this is just going to stamp all the adjustments that we've made together and create a brand new layer for me. What I'm going to do here is go back into my curves adjustments and just increase the contrast a little bit more and just reduce opacity to about 40%. I'm going to go back onto that layer, and this is what I'm going to do my liquify. So I'm going to go to filter and come down to liquify. So over here, what I will do is just smoothing out her arm a tiny bit, and then also smoothing out the direction of the line in the dress, just to make sure it falls where it's supposed to fall. I'm also going to bring this out a tiny bit to fix her shape, because again, the pose that we had her doing was a little bit weird. So yeah, and then move this up a tiny bit. Yeah. Once I'm here, I'm also just going to increase the size of her hair just to make it a little bit bigger. And I do it before and after. This is what we have, and this looks amazing. I'm gonna hit OK. And now this should be our final edit. So if I do a quick before and after, before, after, before, after. Let me know what you feel about this edit in the comments down below. Again, if you don't have the workflow actions, you can copy it from my website. And if you do, you are supporting me, helping me create more videos like this. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment box. I will be creating videos answering your questions going forward. So it's a new thing I want to start, and I need your support. So leave a question or leave a comment, and I will create a video answering your question. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. And remember, don't ever give up.